Good evening. Welcome back to another episode of the Brothas-in-law. As you know, I'm Corey Taylor, and I'm with Michael Bradley. And tonight's discussion is going to be shoot to kill. All right, a little bit of hot topic here. Since everything's going on, we're going to try to make some sense of put some reasoning behind why officers shoot to stop a threat.
Right.
But before we dive into the topic, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Check us out over on Facebook at Brothas-in-law or over on Instagram at the Brothas-in-law_21. Hit us up. Let us know if you like this content of this video. Share your experiences with law enforcement that you had, interactions you had with them. Let us know what your experiences were. And if you have questions about that, maybe we can shed some light on that for you. Excuse me. And hit that hit that like, share, and subscribe button. We're trying to uplift our viewership so we can get out there and share this knowledge of staying calm. Remember, staying calm, comply, answer questions, listen, and move on. Right? That's the end objective that we want you to have when you're interacting with the law enforcement. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into tonight's subject, talking about shoot to kill. So, lots been happening over the course of the last week since we did our last video, as you know, yeah. Mike. And, I've had questions asked to me before, why can't police officers just, shoot somebody in the leg or in the arm?
Right.
There's reasons behind that. If you want, you can go ahead and start that off, and I'll chime in.
Okay.
Behind you.
Well, firearms training is obviously something that police officers do quite a bit, whether it's on their own time or on duty time. On duty, we went to the range, did range qualifications at least twice a year. And that training was dealing with a whole lot of stuff. I mean, we had everything from taser to firearm to beanbag shotgun to AR-15 training. I mean, whatever you carried in your car as a patrol officer, that's what you rolled with. And that's what you trained with all the time. So, and those targets, when you shooting those targets at the range, they don't have arms and legs. They have upper torso and the head. You know, see what I'm saying? So yes. When an officer trains to use deadly force being, let's just assume we're talking about a firearm in this particular case. Deadly force is a firearm, okay? Let's establish that right out the gate. So when you come across a circumstance that officer feels he or she needs to use deadly force, they're going to use deadly force to stop that deadly threat, whether it's protecting themselves or protecting a citizen whom they are trying to, who they responded to. So the old question, are they trying to kill the guy? You hear that question quite a lot from the citizens. And no, I mean, when we use deadly force, we know that there's a possibility that this person can die. We know that there's a strong possibility that this person can be seriously injured, if not die. That's why they call it deadly force. And that's why we only would use deadly force in a circumstance that we feel as an individual officer, that we feel is a deadly situation, that we have to combat that. So research has shown that just shooting people in the leg or shooting people in the arm, like you see on TV, those television movies where you have the sniper that from a mile away shoots the firearm out of the hand of the suspect. We don't, as a patrol officer, everyday patrol officer, you're not doing those things.
No.
You'd be lucky to even have a sniper on the street with you at the time. That's usually part of a SWAT team, and only certain situations will a SWAT team be called out. And most of the time, you won't have a SWAT team with you. It's you as a particular patrol officer dealing with that, right?
That's right.
So, we train to if we're going to use deadly force, we train to our target is center mass of the upper torso or the headshot. That's what we train. If you have a weapon that I perceive can be deadly, and I think that there's a chance that I'm going to lose my life or the person that I'm trying to protect is going to lose theirs, then I'm going to use deadly force, which is my firearm, to stop that threat. And that's why citizens always say, well, officers are trained when they go to court, they're trained to say that they're using deadly force to quote unquote stop the threat. That's true, because that's what we're trying to do. We don't want to kill you. Of course not. But we do understand by using deadly force, we might kill you, but that is not our intent. Our intent literally is to stop the threat. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So I think a lot of citizens, even though it's a common phrase that officers use, like in courtrooms and stuff like that, it is the truth. We didn't come here, or we didn't respond to this call for service to take someone's life. We never do. We never have an intention of taking someone's life. We only have an intention to stop that threat. And when that threat is stopped, continue on with what we are trained to do, whether that's render first aid, whatever that is. We train to follow up after that deadly force is used. And I'm sure that's how it is across the country when it comes to deadly force. You'll always have the argument of, well, when is deadly force necessary? Well, that's up to that individual officer to make that judgment call when they feel deadly force is necessary. If you bring a knife to a gun, that's the old saying, don't bring a knife to a gunfight, right? And I use that term loosely, but that, that's the truth. If I was in a fight with someone and they had a knife, I would rather have a gun. I'm not going to have a knife to combat another knife. I don't have a lot of experience doing knife fights. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So the police job is to elevate their force at least a level above what force they're being met with. They don't get paid for fair fights. We don't get paid to go toe to toe with someone. We get paid to overcome someone, take control of that situation and that scenario, get that suspect under physical control so that you can carry on with the rest of your whatever the call for service is.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
No, you're on point. What I would just add to it, you got to think about this, versus when you're shooting somebody, shooting them in center mass and shooting them in the leg, your remaining goal, like you said, your objective is to stop the threat. If it's one shot and they stop, then it's just one shot. But you keep shooting until that threat has stopped. I know that sounds bad, and a lot of people always say, well, why do you have to shoot 6, 7, 8, 9 times? Well, you know what? If you're coming at me and you're hyped up on drugs, one shot may not put that person down. It may take 5, 6 shots to put that person down, and the threat is no longer a hazard too, right? And so we're gonna shoot until the threat is stopped. Now, keep in mind, military, we train this way. We're not trained to kill. So that concept of misconception of police are out here just to gun people down. No, if they're shooting to stop that threat, whatever it may be, like you're saying. And particularly in this last shooting of the young girl up in Columbus, back in our home state, that officer was still 15, 20 feet away. So, people were saying, well, how come he didn't, run up to her and grab? He doesn't, you don't want to jeopardize your life, right? I'm not going to come up to you and you got a knife. You could still get me, stab me and kill me. So he had that right distance, separation so that he can engage her. Now, she was in motion of getting ready to stab that other young girl, and could have been deadly. Now, you're damn if you do and you're damn if you don't in this profession now. If he did not act and that young girl in the pink got killed, then the headline will, white police officer lets a black girl get stabbed to death before he tries to do anything, or whatever, however you want to word that. So he did the right thing. He had to act. Now, I would tell you that if that was your daughter here in Virginia and I was patrolling, I would have dropped that girl with the knife too. Sure would have, to protect that other life. And that's the police officer's job, is to preserve life, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that was as sad as it is, every life taken is a tragedy. Every life taken, especially from a child, is a tragedy. That's not what we're trying to. We're not trying to reduce that feeling. However, that is a textbook scenario of an officer shooting. Textbook scenario. We've had scenarios in training just like that as police officers, where a person has a knife and they're getting ready to stab someone else. What are you going to do? Are you going to shoot or don't shoot? You walk into the room and we have specifically, I recall, a domestic violence scenario, training scenario, just like that, where the spouse had a knife in their hand and had the female pinned down on the bed and with the knife in his hand. And you walk into the room and the male has the knife up in the air, looking like he's getting ready to stab the female. And that's a shoot or don't shoot scenario. That is obviously any reasonable officer in that scenario would shoot. You see what I'm saying? So that Columbus stabbing or shooting, if you will, was tragic. Yes, it was. But any reasonable officer would have done the same. Yeah, I would have shot that girl. That officer had a millisecond to make that decision, to see that knife.
I counted, and he had right about 6 seconds from the time that other girl, the first young girl, fell to the ground. It was 6 seconds.
6 seconds.
6 seconds that he had to pull. Now, you think you can get her to that other girl that fast to try to, wrestle that knife out of her hand without risking yourself getting hurt as law enforcement, or still that young girl in pink, getting hurt. Another thing on that that incident, that tragic incident, they said that the officer shot the girl and she's the one that called the police. Well, there's a couple things I have a problem with that. One, if she was the one that made the phone call to the police, fine and dandy. My question is that she should have, or not question, my answer to that would be, well, she should have stayed in the house. If she did, in fact,
she should have stayed in the house. You definitely should have had that.
However, when she changed the script, now see, the officer didn't know who made the phone call, right? He doesn't know, right? We never know who the caller is and everything when we get calls. And so when she came out, if she was the one that made the phone call, well, she came out being the aggressor now. So at that point,
you changed from being the victim to the aggressor, right?
So her chance of, however she wanted it to should have had played out was gone once she started charging that first young lady with the knife.
Right. And keep in mind, when officers get to a call, it really doesn't matter. We're not thinking about who called necessarily.
No.
In a situation, especially in a situation like that, the call was, from what I understand it to be, no matter who called, the details of the call is what the officers are mostly paying attention to.
Correct.
Which is, you have person A getting ready to stab person
B. Yeah.
It was my understanding that was what the call for service, how it was received by the officers, that there was some knife play going on. Someone was concerned that someone was about to get stabbed.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't matter who called the police. Right. As a police officer, as a patrol officer responding to that scene, you can only react to what is put in front of you when you get on the scene.
Yeah.
Now, when he got on the scene, well, at least when I saw from the video, the first piece of violence he saw was that girl who had been pushed down to the ground and some guy kicked her in the head. It looked to me like he kicked her in the head. And then a second after that, he sees the 15 or 16-year-old with the knife in her hand in motion, getting ready to stab another girl that she had pinned up against the car. So, as you know, like you always say, Corey, we always hate the Monday morning quarterback because you're kind of we have the luxury of sitting back here with time on our hands, being able to review a video in slow motion as many times as we want.
Yep.
We have that comfort and ability to be able to sit here, and now we can make judgment calls on whether or not that should have happened. But as an officer at that moment who doesn't have the luxury of slowing time down, who doesn't have the luxury of doing an action and then coming back and reviewing that action multiple times, being able to hit the rewind button or the fast forward button, an officer on the scene doesn't have that ability. They have to act at that time, at that moment, at that second with what they're seeing. Right. Remember what we used to always say when we started doing these shows is that officers only react to what you are showing them. You see what I'm saying? Or they react to what they perceive could be a threat. So they'll have you do A, B, C, and D. That's on the slow end of it. Or they show up like this particular officer did in this case. He showed up and this girl was in the middle of getting ready to stab someone.
Yeah.
Now, I said before, I understand people are upset because it's a kid that was shot and killed by police, but you gotta look at the circumstance in the context of the situation. Any reasonable officer would have done the same thing. I would, as a reasonable officer, and of course, me and you, we consider ourselves reasonable officers when we were police officers. We would have done the same thing because, as I said, that's a textbook scenario.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, you can't. I think he shot her 4 times, but even still, I mean, he had to stop the motion of her even trying to, puncture her with that knife. And so, yeah, it took 4 shots. Her having that adrenaline going in through her body, she might not have felt that first round. Or the second,
no, she may not.
Because
and even if she did, it may not have stopped her motion.
It may not have stopped her. And then I was asked too, well, how come he didn't shoot a warning shot? As well, as I know it to be throughout the whole country, police officers don't give warning shots. We're not going to just shoot up in the air because guess what? You have to account for that round, right? We have to.
Right. And you never shoot a firearm in the air, no matter what, because what comes up must come down.
You have to account for that round. So guess what? If that round comes down and somebody's out in their front yard and they're just looking, seeing what's going on at this house here, and that round hits somebody in the head, guess what? That police officer is going to be held accountable for that because he's got that round. So that's another reason the importance of shooting center mass. Don't give you a warning shot. Where he had very little to probably no time at all to say stop, drop the knife. It happens so quick. I mean, like you said, Mike, we don't like to get into the Monday morning quarterback, but when you got that time to sit and dissect the situation that happened, you can say, well, he didn't do this. He didn't. Look, he had maybe 6 seconds to react. And in that time, and you may not even get a warning out. Hey, drop it. It happens that fast.
And keep in mind, it takes a little bit of time for your brain to process what's going on for you to take action and do what you need to do. By the time the officer sees the threat, it takes a moment for his brain to process what he just saw. And then it takes another moment for him to make the action of grabbing his firearm, pulling it out, right? And then pulling that trigger.
Mhm.
So when you break that down, if you research any kind of police training as far as shoot, don't shoot scenarios and the process it takes your mind to operate in that chain of command, if you will, okay, or chain of events, if you will, then you will know that it takes a moment to respond to that. So once you're in the motion of doing that, it's going to take another half second or so for you to realize whether or not you need to continue that and stop or go, right?
Right.
But in this situation, it happened so fast that that officer didn't really have time to react other than to do what he did, which was stop the threat, stop the deadly threat.
Mm-hmm.
And have we become so desensitized to violence that we don't look at this person with a knife getting ready to stab the other person? We don't look at that as deadly, or do we not look at that as sensitive enough to take that kind of action? I kind of find that a little disturbing too.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely not a schoolyard fight,
No,
because she actually, and I think her first name, I hope I pronounced her right, was it Micaiah?
I think it was Micaiah, yeah, or
Micaiah,
Micaiah, right?
yeah, Bryant.
Right.
You know, she uttered the words that I'm going to stab you, B. So she already initiated this was she was going to stab her, right? So the officer has to process that. I mean, and made the right decision. And his training kicked in and precisely rendered the enough force necessary to stop the threat and save that young lady's life, the other girl's life, and I think she had a pink outfit on, saved her life.
And
So
you got to realize it's unfortunate that Makai, again, forgive us if we're mispronouncing her name, but it's unfortunate that she lost her life. However, it was not the intention of the officer to kill her. It was the intention of the officer to stop her. That's always the case. And if we got to use that necessary force, then that's it.
Yeah.
And another thing, you're not going to go up and grab the knife out of anybody's hand.
No.
If an officer gets to a scene and there's a person with a knife that's threatening, even if they're not threatening, unless you're already close contact with that person where you're searching them or something like that, that's different. But in the heat of the moment, in the middle of a fight, no officer is going to run up and grab a knife out of someone who is in the motion of getting ready to stab someone. Just for what you said earlier, Corey, we're not going to do that because we don't want to get stabbed. And what good are we if we end up getting stabbed and we can't even protect anybody because now we're injured as the officer?
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And then another aspect of this I want to touch on is, the whole shoot them one time versus shoot them 6 times. When officers get into a shooting, they don't count bullets in a shooting, even whether it's in training or real time. As you said before, Corey, you're shooting to stop the threat. And if you got to continue to pull that trigger, you got to pull that trigger 5, 6 times to stop that threat, then that's what it is. Think of it, and I don't mean to make light of the situation comparing it to a video game, but I'm going to do that loosely here for a moment. Think of a video game, like a Call of Duty video game or some kind of shooting video game that if you've ever played. And when you are shooting that enemy, if you will, or the other team members, because they're shooting at you, do you just push that controller trigger one time? No, I don't know anybody just one time and that's it. You're either holding that down because you're shooting an automatic firearm, or you're pulling that trigger multiple times because you're firing a semi-automatic in the game, I'm saying. So think of it that way. And it's kind of the same way if an officer is presented with a situation where they have to use deadly force. Mm-hmm. They're not counting bullets. They're not thinking at the top of my head, well, let me just shoot one time and let's see what happens. They don't have that luxury of slowing down time to say, I'm just going to shoot one bullet and see what happens. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So people got to, if you've never been to a range as a citizen to fire a firearm, I encourage you to do that. Go to a range, have some training or something, and actually fire a gun and see what it feels like. And imagine if you had a threat in front of you and you had to pull that trigger multiple times. That'll give you an idea of what it feels like. Why an officer doesn't just shoot one time.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? That's TV stuff. We don't do that.
Yeah, this is real world. This is in Hollywood, and it's frustrating when I hear people on these talk shows and everything where they could have shot her in the hand or they could have shot her in the leg. You, like you said earlier, the center mass is just that. I mean, it's the silhouette of your body is the biggest part of your body. The more mass. Right. And it's an easier target for the officer to hit because it's a bigger target because it's difficult because if, like you said, if you only actually go to the range twice a year to keep your qualifications, right? Any other time you go to the range is on your own dime, right? Mm-hmm. Those rounds come out of your pocket to keep your profession up. So every officer that's out there is not a marksman. All right, where they can put sights on and boom, boom. Yeah, I just knocked the knife right out of your hand. Now think about this too. What if he did try to go for her arm, right? And he missed. And he hit that young girl. And then he's ended up killing both of them, right? What's the attitude of the people then? Oh, well, you're going to change the story now. Oh, well, he should have shot her. Why didn't he shoot her in the back? Oh, well, you wanted me to shoot her in the arm or in the leg, right? So you have to think about that because not only you have to worry, the officer has to worry about his whole 360, right? He has to know what's on the backside of those young ladies, what's on the other side of the car. There's other houses, there are other cars, there may be other people outside observing. So that's why he had to shoot, center mass and not try to go for the arm or go for the leg because, it could have missed
those
her
are
leg.
Smaller targets.
Right. Yeah. Smaller targets.
Those are smaller targets.
And they're moving, right?
And exactly. It's very difficult to shoot somebody's arm.
I don't know how many people have ever gone hunting, but when you hunt, you don't shoot the deer in the leg, you shoot the deer in the neck area because that's the biggest part. You try to save the body part because that's what you want to eat. But it's a bigger target, so you're not going to shoot no deer in the leg, right? And I'm not going to. And if they're running and shooting, I'm not going to try and shoot you in the leg because it's moving. It's a harder target, so it's different when you're shooting at a steel target versus something that's in motion. And so hitting hitting them in the center mass is where it's at, and that's how we're trained. They're trained in the military that way. Like I said earlier, we're trained in law enforcement that way. So hopefully that gives everybody some clarity on officers in being engaged in the shooting. Now I will say, and still learning more. I think we're all still learning more about the other shooting down in actually about 40 minutes from me down here in North Carolina in Elizabeth City.
I just saw that. I don't know the details of that one yet.
Yeah, I'm still in the dark on that. I don't know. I've been called a few times, asked me what I thought about it. I don't know enough. Again, you're asking me the Monday morning quarterback. I wasn't there, so I can't tell you, why they did what they did. I can't tell you why the guy ran. I can't tell you anything because I wasn't there and I don't know anything. So I think once the information
since you brought that up,
go ahead.
I mean, like you said, I don't know the details of that particular situation, but it did bring to light some things, some questions that I've been asked before about officers shooting people in the back. The average citizen, it seems that their views are more along the lines of there's no reason why an officer should shoot anyone in the back or something like that. And then when I give them a scenario or some scenario that shows that why sometimes it may be necessary to shoot someone in the back, sometimes they still don't agree with it, but at least they have a little bit better understanding of why an officer might shoot someone in the back. And I'm gonna just give you a quick scenario. I'm gonna give you the most obvious scenario where this might be a situation where an officer would shoot someone in the back. Say you have an active shooter, right? You respond to the mall. You're going to the mall, right? And this is an active shooter that's running around in the mall that is shooting his gun, shooting people. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the way we train for active shooters is you go in and you stop the threat immediately. You see what I'm saying? That's in general, that's what an officer is going to do. Mm-hmm. They hear gunshots in the mall. They're going to those gunshots and they're going to stop that threat immediately. Okay. There may be no, you may not have time to say stop. You may not have time to say put your hands up. You may not even have time to say police in some cases, right? But you're presented with an active shooter of someone walking around in the mall, just taking shots at people, just shooting them all. You get there, you see the suspect in front of you. He's popping off rounds. He's not facing you, doesn't even know you're there. Can you shoot that person in the back? Absolutely, you can shoot that person in the back. That is like a textbook scenario right there, that you are stopping an immediate threat of this person actively shooting people in the mall, and you walk up behind him and you shoot him in the back to stop that threat. That's a scenario that probably is one of the more obvious ones that shows how sometimes it may be necessary for someone to get shot in the back.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the other scenario where probably is more in line to their logic of thinking is if that suspect is running away, right? They just committed a felony, whatever that may be, and now they're running. Can you shoot that individual in the back? I think, my honest opinion, I think I had to recall, I may have to go look it up again. But if it's in the commission of a felony, I think that holds a little bit different. If they're shooting back at you, then obviously yes. If they're shooting in front of them, shooting people as they're running away from you, then obviously, yeah, you deadly force would be authorized. But that's still one of those ones, the officer is going to be assessing the situation, because again, if he misses him while he's running, he's got to still account for that round, wherever it may, hit. So, I mean, that's another situation. Now, if it's just for example, I believe that's what is happening down in North Carolina. He was trying to, in the car, the gentleman got in the car and was trying to drive away, and they shot in the car, and there was no weapons or anything like that. Again, I'm speculating, just based on what I read in the news thus far. So I don't know if there was any weapons or anything like that. The articles that I read said there were none, but we know the media has been wrong before on those type of situations. So, but in that instance, from what I just know about that, I do not believe that was a good shoot. That many times to stop the threat. Now, could you shot in the vehicle if he was going to ram the officer, ram other people over, things of that nature, then that's different. But if he's trying just to get away, if that were the case, state police, we know for getting in pursuits. Hey, soon as you jump in the car to try to drive off, I'm jumping in my car because I'm getting ready to go follow you, right? So I don't know enough about that situation down there.
Yeah. And something like that, if a scenario like that, if you're doing a search warrant, usually you're going to have somebody, if the suspect gets away in a search warrant, whether it's an arrest search warrant or just a warrant to search the property for evidence or whatever you're looking for. If it's an arrest warrant, 9 times out of 10, I think most departments, teams that are doing that kind of warrant are going to have a chase car ready, standing by in case the person does manage to get away, get in the car and take off. Then you might have a chase as far as cars are concerned. I don't see, I think you're going to run into some problems if you're like you said, if you're shooting someone in the back when all they're trying to do is get away, on that kind of situation where you're doing a search warrant on a home where you're looking for drugs or whatever you're looking for that way, unless you can show some details as to why as to this person that is fleeing is getting ready to do another violent crime somewhere else. Maybe if you can articulate those kinds of facts, maybe. But outside of that, that's going to be an uphill battle, I think, for any officer. If you shoot somebody like that under those circumstances. Again, I don't know the North Carolina situation. I don't know the details of that. We're not specifically giving you right or wrong in that particular scenario because we don't know all the facts on what happened there.
Right.
We're just speaking from it in general terms. That's an uphill battle. I don't know how you're gonna be able to explain your justification.
I'll say this. I mean, it don't look good for the police department.
Right.
I'll definitely say that. So it would make sense that they would go ahead and release all those body cameras out there. To go ahead and if you're wrong, you're wrong. Let's do what we're supposed to do. Let's be accountable.
That's right. If you're wrong, you're wrong. If there's some training that needs to be done, if there's some punitive actions that need to be taken, okay. It is what it is.
It is what it is. It's you can't try to sugarcoat this, especially if the young man did not have any weapons. You better be able to justify why all of y'all were shooting. Just because somebody's getting in the car to drive away, to flee the scene, does not make them a threat, right?
Nope, sure doesn't.
And everybody we shoot now, again, like I said, we only know what was already put out in the media. But I just, all I can say right now, it doesn't look good for the officers down there.
We also have something that when I was working, when we trained, you have something called a sympathetic fire, right? Which basically is when one officer fires their gun, the other 3 or 4 officers hear that, and they also want to fire their gun, not because they necessarily see a threat, but because they heard their fellow officer fire a gun. And the one thing we used to train with in our department when I was working is you better not do that. In so many words, you as an individual officer better be able to account for why you chose to shoot your weapon. And it better be because you personally saw a threat, a deadly threat that you felt needed to be handled accordingly, not because your partner fired.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So, people understand that too.
Yeah, that usually plays out in combat. You shooting, everybody shoot, but not here, man. Everybody's got to account for rounds expended. And if your round, if a bullet came out of your gun, you need to account for that round. You need to be able to articulate why you fired. Did you see the gun? No, I didn't. So why did you fire? Did you see the gun? No, I didn't. So why did you fire? Did you see the gun? Yeah, I did. Did anybody yell out gun, 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 gun? No. Or did he? I mean, see, and that's the thing, and that's why, we want our viewers to just step back in all these situations and just, still protest, because that's your constitutional right. So peacefully protest, let your voices be heard, and to put the pressure on these courthouses to release videos, or go to the sheriff's department where put the pressure on to release these videos, but still relax and let it come out. And the longer they wait, in my humble opinion, the longer they wait, to me, it doesn't make them look good.
No, yeah,
It doesn't.
yeah. I mean, that's what we have body cameras for.
Right.
Is for us to see it and for the community to see it.
Right.
You know,
but what I'm urging everybody, just be patient right now. Let us all stay calm, right? In a different aspect, and let this play out. And we'll get it rectified, and then we'll be able to comment on it. But like only thing I can say right now is it doesn't look good for the police department.
No, it doesn't.
Why you do that, I never know. But shoot to kill is a training thing that we train to stop threats, and that's the point we want everyone to get tonight on tonight's episode. So
and keep in mind too for our viewers that an officer, I was a police officer for 26 years, right? And I had never been in a real actual shooting. I've known officers that have, but I've never been in an actual shooting myself. Most of my stuff is off from training. I've had to draw my weapon 100 times, sure. Fortunately, I never actually had to pull that trigger.
I came close, but
and 90% of officers go through a full career without ever being in a shooting, and that's a blessing. Let me tell you, because I have seen shootings and what those officers and everybody, not just the officers, but everybody has to go through as far as legal wise, as far as their job goes, as far as the stress of knowing probably that you took someone's life. You know what I mean? If I had to deal with something like that, that would feel a little different. You see what I'm saying? And I've been in my whole adulthood life, I've been in positions where I may have to take someone's life if I was put in that position, whether it was the military or being a police officer. And God protected me that I didn't have to actually pull that trigger outside of training or the range, something like that. Never had to pull that trigger. Had to pull a gun on people plenty of times. You see what I'm saying? But I'm glad that that's as far as it's gotten. And all officers are like that. We don't want to get into a shooting. No,
it's just too much that you have to. Not only the officer himself is going through dealing with taking a young person's life, and with this instance here, what happened in Columbus, and also what he has to deal with, his now it's his credibility and everything being destroyed, and also what his family has to go through.
They're
have to worry about maybe their job and their kids. Probably your daddy is a killer, and you killing baby killer, and whatever the case may be. I saw pulling that weapon out, man. For me, it was like I always said, Lord, please don't let me pull this trigger. Please don't let me pull this trigger, because justifiable or not, you just don't want to take someone's life.
No, you don't.
That's as a human being, as a God-fearing, God-loving man, and appreciates life, all life. For me, all life matters to me. As a child of God, you don't want to have to do that. I mean, I've been in several situations where I had to come to that point, man. And I tell you, you're if you have any type of compassion in your heart literally drops down to your stomach when you're put in that situation. And once it's over, man, I tell you, that's something you just don't want to have to be put in. So
no, not at all. I mean, if anything, I'm glad we have this opportunity, if anything, to give a citizen at least from what a reasonable officer would be thinking or may do. Yeah. And that's what we want to show people. You see what I'm saying? Without race even being involved, this is what a reasonable officer would do.
This was not a racial issue.
No, this was an issue that was confronted.
They don't need to be making this a black or white issue. This, in fact, he saved another black life.
Yeah.
If you think about it, so clearly he wasn't thinking about race. If he were, then hey, well, y'all go ahead and kill yourself then, and I'll come after the fact.
Yeah, if he was really like that, yeah.
Right.
So this was simply an officer confronted with a scenario, not a scenario. A scenario is a fake situation. This is an officer confronted with a situation that he quickly interpreted was a deadly situation, and he used deadly force accordingly and acted on it the way any reasonable officer would have done. And
he used the right amount of force.
He used the right amount of force. I don't know any officer that I've worked with that would not have shot in that situation. Yeah. As we said before, that's a textbook scenario. Yeah. Textbook scenario of training, man going in and getting ready to stab his wife.
Yeah.
Textbook scenario.
And I think a lot of people understand it, because I was with some friends of ours over the weekend, went riding our motorcycles, and quite naturally, that's what we had talked about. And I was like, okay, so what you tell me, what would you have done? And they both said, they were a black couple. They both said, oh, I would have shot her. I said, okay, so what are we talking about? I mean, it wasn't racial. I said, if you can find a race in there, let me know. Right. Age, that factor goes out the window, because I mean,
yeah,
as sad as it is,
I think citizens always look at that age. And like you said, they say,
but see, the officer can't see it like that, right? We all have a special place in our heart for kids. You don't want no harm coming to a kid, but at the same time, somebody has to stop it. Either you're going to have just one dead child, or you're going to have two dead children.
Right. And a 16-year-old can kill you just like a 26-year-old.
Yeah, like you said earlier. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
So the age you cannot allow age in that scenario anyway to play a factor. In that. Yeah, you just can't.
No. So if you like this content of this video here, you like this discussion, let us know what you think. Leave a comment in the box down below, and we'll respond back to you on the next show. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and keep hitting that like button for us. And we will wrap it up and say good night and have a blessed weekend. And we will see y'all next week.
All right. Peace.